My name is Ryley, and you are listening to the Ryley Heppner podcast. Okay.
How do you want to start today?
Yeah. That's always the trick. How do you start and how do you end? I'm sure some people are good at that.
Sure.
Just make it awkward.
We can start awkwardly if you'd like.
What are you reading lately? Let me start with general questions about your life.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about your guests, and I'm like, oh, I could technically be reading everyone else on your show that you have, because you've got a fantastic list of people. I was laughing to myself when I was walking here this morning, being like, if anyone else looked at the list of like a potential guest that you've maybe asked, and they're like, okay, I know this guy, I read this guy's book, or it's like Ben Jepsen. Who's Ben Jepsen? So I'm on a very prestigious list you have.
People
here.
have to find out though, one way or another.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Who Ben Jepsen is.
Oh sure.
You stumble upon a new artist, or
that's right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Also, I would think of you less as an interview and more like a co-host that I pay to co-host.
That's right. That'd be fun too. Yeah. So I'm trying a new thing this year.
Oh, interesting.
So last year I dabbled with the bullet journal. Have you ever heard of the bullet journal?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Should I look it up?
I don't know. Are you into journaling?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well then, absolutely.
Okay, it's journaling. Bullet journaling. Okay. Well, go on.
So the author is Ryder Carroll. It's probably going to be more of an annual read, but I've already read through it for 2024. But I started the practice last year, and then I kind of dropped off. But now I've picked it up since November or so, and I haven't missed a day.
Oh.
So every single day. Here's what it's helped me do. The bullet journal method. Eric Mose introduced me originally to this book.
He's a bullet journaler?
Yeah, though I think he goes in waves.
Okay.
I'm going to try to stick with it for the long haul.
Okay.
Here's what it's done for
long
me.
haul being your life?
That's the plan.
Oh, wow.
Just to stick with it. Because the idea behind it is instead of having multiple notebooks for multiple things, this is supposed to be the ultimate notebook that categorizes every single thing that you do and write. So in the beginning of it, it shows, I mean, it's a whole thing, but it has like an index. So you have your whatever you're tracking is on this page. Notes for this class are on this page. You have a whole index because you put page numbers in your whole notebook. But it has a daily tracker, which is what I find the most beneficial. So what it has done for me since November is I write out my prayer in the morning. So I haven't missed a day of prayer. I mean, I was always consistently praying, but this has really kept me on track. Haven't missed a day of prayer or reading scripture since then.
What times in the morning?
So for me, if I have time before I go to my workout.
This is like an hour?
To do?
A half hour?
Oh, yeah. Like for the prayer is like 10, 15 minutes. I'm writing out my prayer.
And then how much pages of scripture are you reading?
Oh, yeah.
Like
so then after the prayer, and we won't go into too much because it's a whole method, but it helps me track everything I want to read every day.
Okay.
So I literally know every day what I'm going to read that day. And if I miss it, I carry it over to the next day. Like
it gives you a Bible reading plan?
I make my own plan.
Okay.
I haven't given myself the plan, but I'm tracking it in the bullet journal.
Okay.
So that I know it's not just like, well, I want to read scripture today. It's I want to read, minimum.
Different than a bookmark?
Oh, what do you mean?
In terms of knowing what you're going to read next. Like you're not obviously just reading linearly through.
Oh, I am, but maybe more specifically for the other books I'm reading, it helps me track and stay on track with how many books I want to read in 2024 and complete that. So, for example, I have 4 books I'm reading right now.
Yeah.
I take the page numbers of those books, I divide it by the days in the month.
Yep.
And then that's how many pages I got to read every day.
Okay. I do that with scripture.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I know how many times I read through the Bible in a year.
Okay.
Like I decided how many times I wanted to go through, and then I read a certain amount of pages every day.
Yeah.
To make that happen.
Perfect.
But you're doing that with
and I'm doing
books.
it with books and the scriptures.
Sweet.
But then I also use the bullet journal method to track it.
So it's not it's a method. Is it also like you have to buy the bullet journal?
Oh yeah. So the bullet journal is a book,
okay.
but you can use any notebook you want.
Okay.
You just use the method from the book, and it has a whole bunch of other things for
this is
goal
very
tracking.
interesting.
And I loved it.
Okay.
I've read it a few times now. So for scripture, I listen to 3 chapters a day, and then I read 2 chapters at least every day.
Oh, sweet.
So I'm doing kind of 5 chapters from scripture every day. That keeps me on track. And then 4 books. So it's like a book a week. So right now I'm reading one called Same as Ever. It's the guy who wrote The Psychology of Money, but he kind of talks about how we should really understand how it looks like the world's changing, but in many ways it's always consistently the same thing.
Okay.
I'm only like 20 pages in, but it's kind of interesting. I'm reading one on like finances. I'm reading that David Platt book we're reading, Don't Hold Back, I think it's called. And The Pastor, the memoir by Eugene Peterson. So
cool.
Going through that. So yeah, so I cycle through. I just finished John Acuff's book about goals, and now I'm forgetting what it's called. All it takes is a goal or something like that.
Okay.
It was pretty good. Yeah.
So you read, Eric recommended this to you.
The bullet journal.
You were like, this looks amazing.
The bullet journal?
Yeah.
Yeah, he recommended it to me.
Were you journaling before that?
I was doing some journaling, but it was, like I said, it was really scattered. So I had like multiple notebooks for multiple things.
Okay.
This puts it all into my one, and I can carry it with me and take it to meetings or different things like that. So I find it really helpful. Maybe it's not for everybody. And then, of course, if you Google bullet journal, you're going to get tons of variations on the method that people have adopted.
But is there one guy that
there's one guy who created the whole thing and wrote the book, and you can check it.
And then people have taken that and diversified a little.
Yeah, and made it their own or changed things. Yeah, so it's kind of one of the thesis from the book is it will be whatever you need it to be.
Okay.
Around those parameters of
what do you need it to be?
Well, kind of this daily tracker.
Okay. It's a planner for you.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Apart from the writing down prayers. And
then I used to, and I want to get back to it, at the end of the day, they recommend like just the reflection. Okay, where were my emotions today and stuff, but also like, so he's not a Christian, but I included this of where was God moving today, or how was God speaking to me? This is where I do.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, like a kind of a reflection prayer.
Yeah.
So morning, evening prayer, kind of a lectio.
You're writing out your prayer like word for word?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
dear Lord.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, that's
cool because you can look back on them.
Right. And so it's really interesting when that's one of the things the bullet journal talks about is it gives you history for your goals and progress and stuff, but also for things like that where you can see where you're growing, but also where you're at with the Lord and prayer and all that kind of stuff. So if you looked a year ago today, it was like, what was I praying for on that day?
Yeah.
And maybe how the Lord had answered and stuff.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. I mean, tons of people have been doing this for a long time, but it kind of gives a bit of a system for it that works for me.
Just an evolved version of journaling.
Yeah. That's all it is.
I mean, my journaling encapsulates prayers and thoughts and struggles and whatever, but not as systematic as like making sure every day I write out the whole, so I can look back historically and see things, but I wouldn't be able to see like a prayer every single, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it keeps me on track. So that's good. I mean, I pray throughout the day too, but the other thing that I really like about it is, I think you kind of hinted at too, is like, when you're just writing ideas or brainstorming, now I don't have to like look through and be like, where did I write that good idea I had? I can go in my index and go, okay, on page 58, titled ideas. And then I can just go back to that page in my notebook and see, okay, this is when I was writing my ideas.
Yeah.
And if I've finished that page, I can just make the next, open page to go, okay, ideas part 2 is on page 103 now.
Yeah.
So then I at least know where everything kind of is. So that's been helpful.
Awesome. You know when I started journaling?
High school?
No, when I mean it would have been 2005 or 6 when we were at camp.
Okay.
And Blake was the program director
with his notebook.
Dylan. Well, he had a notebook, but remember him and Dylan went to the dollar store and bought all these flowery journals and handed them out, and they were like, every day through the summer you need to journal and hand this in, and then Blake will write notes back to you.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, all the boys were like, this is
Not
stupid,
doing
and
it.
never handed them in.
Yeah.
And I handed, I loved it. I didn't know what I was missing until Blake introduced me to journaling, and I handed it in every day of the whole summer. I still could go back and look at that journal.
That is awesome.
And the sticky notes are still in it.
Wow.
Of Blake writing back to me, being like, "This is cool," and blah blah blah.
Oh man,
whatever.
What?
And I never stopped after that. I just then kept buying the Nuts journal. And
did they put like a reading plan in there or something pasted in the, or is it?
They might have, but for the most part, it was just like you journaled, and the accountability was that Blake would write back to you.
What commitment on your part, but also what commitment on his,
Blake.
If we had all done it, and how many he would just sit down and read.
Yeah.
Oh, good for Blake.
Yeah, I'm sure he remembers that.
I
So
wonder,
my journal is like this yellow book with like blue flowers all over it.
I vaguely remember this now.
Okay.
I wonder if Blake is journaling now.
Yeah, that's the real question. If Blake and Dylan are still.
Or are they maybe just reviewing still? We should send them to Blake in the mail.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to hold on to journals for years too. Yeah. As you.
For sure.
I'm sure you have done the same. Like, look back to like a decade or 2 decades and see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I'm reading.
Nice. What have you been learning in your reading? What's been most significant?
Well, I mean, the bullet journal stuff's been really helpful. I think the pastor always.
You've read this before?
Yeah, I've read it a couple times.
Okay.
It always energizes me in a way of pastoral ministry that I think is exciting. Just the way that he unpacks what he was wrestling with in the North American church to a different way that he was trying to search out for that vocation. So yeah, his wrestling with that ministerial essentially group that they had for years.
He had a good ministerial.
A really solid group of pastors that would meet weekly, and then they would just work through what does it mean to be a pastor. And
that was just the weekly.
I think so. I think it was
or monthly or whatever.
Yeah, however often they met.
Like they never moved past that.
I don't think so. They just always kept to that.
Yeah.
And then try to keep each other accountable. So I just had finished the part of the book where one of them had been meeting with this group for a significant amount of years, and then he got an offer to like a really big church.
Okay.
And Peterson was nervous for him and met with him and said, I don't think this is a good idea. And here's the reasons why, and all this kind of stuff. And in the way that this other individual was talking about kind of like climbing a ladder in pastoral ministry to a bigger church. And Peterson's like, it's not about numbers. In fact, he wrote in this memoir that they almost considered larger churches the same as you would consider cancer.
Okay.
Like a growth in a bad way.
Sure.
Because you couldn't be an effective pastor.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he hammered on that publicly outside of that or not, but
he's such an interesting guy.
Yeah.
I think it was in his the book that he wrote letters back to his son.
Yeah.
Whatever that was called, Letters to My Son, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
Pretty sure it was in there where he talks about going down to Texas somewhere, some kind of real Bible Belt place, to a bookstore and doing like a signing for The Message.
Oh yeah,
I think that's what it was. And he was just so so uncomfortable and wrong and dumb that he just in a very I don't know, impactful way, just kind of writes about how he just vowed to never do that again. And like, he just didn't want any of the applause, and it was just so backwards. And it was really interesting, and just a perspective that like few other evangelical pastors seem to have. I'm sure book signings happen all the time. I mean, it's a little different maybe when you're signing for a Bible, but he would have I felt the same about
any of his
books. I think he just like did not want praise, did not think numbers were the key to ministry. Like,
well, and if you remember when we met with Eric Peterson, his son, that story has stuck with me where he talked about Eugene getting this like huge opportunity to go speak at some massive stadium of people or something with others, whether it was a conference or something.
It was in like South America or something.
Yeah, it was overseas or different country or whatever. And he was debating it, and Eric was like, why is this even a question? Like, you have to go. And Eugene kind of just talking like, I'm weighing the cost of like my soul, of like, if I do this, I could be handing over something that I shouldn't. Or
I think Eric's words were like, he was like, what are you worried about? Like, what are you scared of happening or something? And he's like, losing my soul.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow. Like, anyway. So, I mean, that book's always great to come back to. That book, every time
even though right now you're not,
even though I'm currently not a pastor, every time I read it, and now I'm reading it for the first time as not a pastor, it excites me to be a pastor. Or like, I always feel like this is what I think pastoral ministry should be. Or so that's one of those things from
which he's laying out what he would consider and we would consider a biblical description of a pastor.
For sure.
So funny that it cites a person. And then the expectations that a congregation puts on you often do not excite.
It can be. There can be a tension there.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Because I think Peterson's the one that has often, but just by laying out the description, but has contrasted like what people expect of you and what God expects in like the very different descriptions of,
for sure,
pastoring.
Yeah.
And the one's very life-giving and the one very life-taking. Maybe you really started this whole thing by, I mean, me inviting people to like ask if I can interview them. You did this with Eugene Peterson's son.
Oh, sure. I mean,
I suppose that was the catalyst. That was only a year ago, right?
Yeah, about a year ago or whatever. Because you just reach out to people and you're surprised that they're. Yeah, I mean, even Eric Peterson, he's only a couple hours away from us.
Yeah, Spokane.
And he was like, "Oh, just let me know. We'll come have lunch." Or
I got a room for you.
Yeah, it's like, which I mean, again, just helps us to realize these people are normal people. They're celebrities to us in a way because they're working in the field that we work in, and we think the work they're doing is really important. But they would hate to be called celebrity or famous, or whether it's anyone that you've already had on your show, I'm sure would say the same thing, and just kind of go, that's not why I'm doing it or anything like that. In fact, I'm trying to avoid that title or that direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of these people we look up to, authors and pastors and stuff, they're pretty accessible.
Yeah. And then some like probably don't even want to be noticed just because, I mean, the reason they're in scholarship is probably, or their personality caters to their career, in that they're kind of, some of them I think are moles. I remember reaching out to one guy not too long ago, I think I told you, and he was like, would love to, but honestly, I find these things exhausting.
Yeah.
Because he's at home in a room studying and writing, doing the things we admire him for and benefit from. But
his strength isn't
not excited to
interview.
just like chat on.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is funny.
That is funny.
Which is most pastors do, I feel like, often.
Yeah, I wonder what the stats are, and like if we'd say introvert to extrovert.
I mean, I would classify myself as an introvert, and I'm just always surprised how many other introverted pastors I seem to meet. Yeah, and some that are on bigger stages. Like, I don't know if I'm not supposed to say. Not that it matters. No one's watching, and nobody's done anything illegal. But the pastor, I can't remember his name now. Even he who planted Westside in Vancouver. What was his name? I don't know. I want to say something Newton or. Anyways, he came and spoke at ATS 29.
Oh, okay.
Thing in Canmore, and he has a big platform. I mean, he has a thing on YouTube even where he's interviewing John Piper. Like he's got lots of connections and stuff, and he was a complete introvert.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who speak on a big stage or can do public speaking that are completely comfortable there.
In that asymmetrical.
Yeah. But then if they had to come down and talk to a few people, they'd be like, ooh, it's draining, or I can't. Or so there is some kind of connection there. But it does seem natural to think like an extrovert would be the one on the big stage.
Yeah. I think the thing, like that guy who was like, I don't really want to do podcasts, I find that exhausting. He also said, I work 80 hours a week, so I don't have a lot of time, which that 80 hours is just reading and writing.
Oh, man.
So I think, too, like the people that end up on stages are there because of what they've thought about, written, written, explained, or whatever. And that comes about because they spend so much time studying. And that comes about only because they're introverted.
Wow.
The guy who's extroverted probably wouldn't have the capacity to be locked in a room studying that much to get those, kind of mine those deep things out.
Yeah. Wow.
So maybe in pastors, I bet the more extroverted ones probably aren't as focused on the preaching in quite the same way.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yep.
And the real studying, teaching, preaching ones probably aren't visiting as many people.
Right. Yeah. That
maybe.
could be.
I don't know.
It could be.
Don't know that one's right or wrong.
No.
Anything you've been excited about lately?
Yeah. I mean, this new job has been really exciting. That's been fun. Working with a new team, so that's interesting in a good way. So just learning new team dynamics, a new boss, how it all fits together and works. So that's been cool. And
what's your new job title?
I am the academic coordinator for the Coalition for Youth Ministry.
Sweet. The AC.
Yeah, the AC, that's right. So, I mean, it's kind of a new position that we're creating together as we go in many ways, taking care of all of the grading for all the papers, reading through all the students' work, and then interacting with them through their work, trying to give good coaching direction, not just academically, but for their profession or their jobs or ministry, wherever they're working, because they need to be in ministry to be in the coalition.
So you're coaching.
Yeah. So like
it's very pastoral.
I consider the students certainly like in my care in many ways, and whatever they're walking through within their ministries.
Even though you're the AC, it's not largely an academic.
Yeah,
it's a piece of it.
Yeah, it's a piece of it. I mean, titles are titles too. They're helpful in some ways and not in other ways. I mean, my focus is a lot of the grading and marking.
Sure.
But they really want to be intentional that it's not just read the paper, give the mark, but give helpful feedback in certain areas to go, okay, you need to watch and grow in these ways in your work. Hopefully that kind of comes out through the work that they're doing, because the work they're doing should be very practical for these classes. But yeah, I mean, I might help a little bit with recruitment and all that kind of stuff. I mean, also with just being with the students during their classes when they have the 1 week classes. But yeah, academic coordinator might be not exactly the right title, but we're working it out.
Okay.
Also excited to start a doctorate.
Sweet.
That'll be coming up soon, whether it's a DMin or I don't know, PhD, or if I can even get into one, or what that's going to look like. So I really got to get that going here in the next couple of months. But
I mean, if you don't quite, as you said before, you might have some things that don't qualify you for the PhD, but you should always be accepted kind of with some prerequisite or some like,
right.
You're accepted based on
accomplishing
you completing this, and this.
Right. Yeah, so I got to look more into that. Still, I need to take time to do that here in the coming weeks. But
sweet,
that'll be exciting too. I'm sure it's going to be a ton of work, but yeah.
So you just transitioned out of a long-term ministry role.
Yeah.
What, if I could ask, what has surprised you most about the transition process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, did you think it would be easier or harder? Or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I feel like all I've ever known since high school is that I wanted to be a pastor.
Okay.
Specifically a youth pastor. And then I think even as I was a youth pastor, just
a funny desire as a high schooler.
Yeah, I think it's an anomaly.
I mean, what did you see that you're like, I want to do that?
Yeah, I think
I sat in church being like, oh, I never want to be a pastor.
Can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think even since elementary school, I remember people calling out leadership qualities in me.
Okay.
So there's the leader aspect that was appealing to me of a pastoral role where you are a leader. So that I felt that was kind of exciting. I loved the idea, especially in youth ministry, helping people and helping them grow spiritually. Kind of like that when I used to do the daily passage email newsletter, I guess it'd be called now if we were to do it today.
Yep.
Just writing out my thoughts on scriptures every day and sending it out. The goal there, I mean, was to help people get in the Word. So, I mean, that kind of played into...
Too bad you couldn't have had a podcast.
Maybe it really would have taken off.
I bet your
recorded.
Your dad would have set it up for you.
That's right. He had some tech stuff back in the day. Windows 95.
Did you see a pastor that made you want to be a pastor?
Yeah, I mean, our youth pastor, I think, was, Chester Weeb.
But did you want it before him? All right, not want even, but felt like it was already...
Yeah, that was probably around the time where it was like, I see what Chester does. I appreciate what he does. I want to do that too. And then his encouragement in that as well. And so, yeah, probably around, I always put it around grade 10 or 11 where I'm like, okay, I'll be going to Bible college when I finish high school and then pursuing that.
So as you say, it's all you ever knew.
Yeah, right. So
that desire.
long answer here. But essentially, that's all I've ever known. And then got the BA, got the job. Never thought anything out after that. I don't know if a lot of people do or not.
I applied for the job.
It didn't get it.
Nope.
Yeah, because I got it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I was even living here. You weren't living here.
I was at Briarcrest.
I think I was helping in youth.
Yeah.
Again, you weren't even here.
Yeah, it's a real sore spot for you. You bring it up often.
Have I brought it up? I'm just joking.
So we'll have to work that through, I guess. I mean, there's some vacancies there now if you want to.
Sure, I can apply now.
Apply again, but that
worked well. That you just
so shifted into it and never thought much else. So I guess one of the biggest things transitioning from that, when you have an expectation of what you want to do, who you want to be, or whatever, and then that coming to an end, there's an identity thing that can be hard, especially within a pastoral role position. I think what has been the hardest is I've underestimated just how hard it would be overall. And then just the impact on my family, specifically when you're so involved with a church community.
Yeah.
Especially for Shane and I, it's been over 12 years at Gospel Chapel.
Like not even as a pastor, just like friendships.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's your community. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it's like overnight, December 31st is my last Sunday, January 1st, I'm like, well, now we're not there. And then it's just navigating what that looks like.
I mean, it's like school where like people still might be your friends, but you had this like routine, like I will see you every Sunday or I'll see you every morning or whatever. Yeah. And then that ends. You're like, now I won't see you unless I make a plan to see you.
Yeah, totally. And I've only ever thought about that a few times when people who were a part of our church and then left.
Yep.
And I go, oh, now I never see that person, even though we both live in Grand Forks, small town. So then when it's the reverse and I'm the one who's left, and now there's a whole group of like 200 to 300 people or whatever, maybe less, it's like, unless I make the plan to, I will not see all of these people, not to mention the fact that I grew up in that church. So then there's just a whole bunch of people in that category too. So that's really interesting.
It's harder to be the one leaving too than the one staying there. Because when you're there and someone leaves, you're still with the group.
Right.
So it's like, see ya.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure there's people at Gospel Chapel right now. They're like, oh, yeah, Ben and Shayna, or we miss them or whatever. But I think there's hopefully, which is a healthy thing, that they're not like, well, now we can't function or whatever. Yep. You're right. It's like, he's gone. Okay, well, we'll carry on here. And so that's been hard. So I think to answer the question really is just the question of like, how do you leave that, and then even more so, is there an opportunity, or how can you re-engage down the line? Because we would like to
re-engage with the church.
Yeah. To be back a part of the community of Gospel Chapel and to serve in other ways, but already within the first, so we're 1 month in now, in January.
Of a planned
just finished.
A few months, 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, originally we're thinking 3 months, but it may be longer. But we're 1 month in, and already there's been a number of people who've reached out to be like, hey, could you help us with this, or can you serve in this capacity, or can you a few things. And I'm like, no, like I don't think I'm ready. But I think the way that I said it to their defense, the way that I had presented was, I can't wait to serve right away, and I'm ready to go right away.
Okay.
Realizing after, I'm like, oh wait, I actually need a separation for a bit, or I need a bit of a break in a sense, and just to step back. So that's been harder too, I think, overall, where you're just like, you're so intensely involved in a ministry, and then you're just not. And now I'm involved with a different ministry, which I'm thankful for, but that's just way different too. I mean, it's still a Christian organization and ministry, but the whole thing is different, especially working from home.
Yeah.
I might not see anyone all day. Basically, I'm in my office working away, and I love it, but it's like, oh, this is just so different.
Yeah.
So those are some of those. I mean, it's kind of that book I'm reading called, Same as Ever or whatever. It's just like, you don't know. You can plan all you want for certain things, but the biggest risk in your future is the one you'll never know.
Sure.
So you can plan for risks and you can have contingencies and all that stuff, which is good, and you should.
Yeah.
But the one that's going to be the biggest trouble for you is the one that you didn't plan for.
Yeah.
So I didn't plan for how I would feel after I left, and what that relationship would look like, and what it might look like in 2024 later on. So
yeah.
Are
you going to, in the time until you transition back, are you going to find a community?
Yeah, we're still working through what that might look like. The only thing we talked about is just kind of visiting the other churches in Grand Forks for now, and
which is neat. You just never really put any roots in.
Well, that's the thing is it's one thing because we've never really gone to any other churches, so there's a cool opportunity just to go to visit, but you're not part of their families.
Yeah.
And so there's a tension of, do you settle into a church and, like you said, get rooted and be part of a church community, but then leave within a couple months?
Yeah. I give you my opinion.
Sure.
Well, I had a conversation with the guy last week, maybe the week before, a friend who's been here for quite a while now, a couple years, but still has not really connected too much. His family in the community, definitely not rooted, piped into a church.
Yeah.
Even though they come once in a while here and there.
Okay.
And I was like, why are you so hit and miss? Why don't you root down more? And it kind of was based on like a fear that, like, we're not going to be here that long anyway. So then, the fear being kind of like, if we already have a plan to go, if we put roots down here, then we're scared that we won't go. Like it'll, ruin the plan of going. Right? Like we'll get stuck here.
Yeah. Okay.
I've heard that. I feel like 1,000 times. It's like, we're only gonna be here for a while, so there's no point in doing this. And, it'll make it harder, or it'll ruin our plans, or whatever. And I said to him, basically these words. I was like, I think that's the dumbest idea ever. If you know you're going to be here for 15 days, make as many roots as you can in those 15 days, and you'll enjoy that time. Like they're not really, I think, in a large part, not really enjoying that. Well, he was expressing that like we don't feel connected anywhere, and like we haven't found community. I'm like, that's because you're not plugging in anywhere, because you got your mind set on you're only here for a short time.
Yeah.
Where I think if you were here for like a month, you could maybe made some sweet friendships in that month, or like made some neat connections or some neat experiences. And if that makes it harder to leave in a month, I think that's a good thing.
Right.
Like I'd rather have been in 1,000 places that I left communities behind that I was connected to, than to have never connected anywhere and not have really any memories anywhere. So it's easy to leave any place. And I was just thinking, when I was talking to him, I was thinking about like Israel going to Babylon, and then God saying in Jeremiah, like, obviously you're not only, they understand or hope they're only going to be there for a short time, and it's a place they don't even want to be. And God's like, well, you're here, so make roots. He's like, build houses, plant gardens, marry off your daughters, work for the good of the city, work for the welfare of the city. So I was just encouraging that guy. And then all of a sudden they were at church this last weekend, so I was like, maybe. I was like, you're here for another year, like
that's a long time.
Make a community in that
for
year.
Sure.
Or
living as exiles.
I think if in your 3 months, like you could have some sweet community in that 3 months that doesn't stop you from carrying on, but it might make your time richer in those 3 months. Actually, we have one guy that comes to this church that he was only here for probably 3-4 months while his company was moving the houses around town from the flood.
Right.
And he could have been a stranger and never, really connected, or been like, I'm just working here. Whatever. He came and got so involved with the church that now to this, like a year later, every like month or 2 months, he's back for a weekend, staying with people in the church, coming to service, like just hanging out, because he made such community in the literally like matter of weeks that he was here working. I just think that's the better experience than the people who kind of come and.
For sure. Great point.
Not that I know about your situation, but in terms of the short term, I always think my theory is that it's more worth still going for the community and the roots and whatever, connecting in the short time, than, because really we don't know how short or long we're going to be anywhere. And if you always live like kind of a stranger on the way through, then I don't know, I think you miss out on a lot.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to keep wrestling that one out as a family. And I mean, it feels like just yesterday we were at Gospel Chapel.
Sure.
So it's pretty fresh, and just, trying to figure out what that's going to look like as we go. So those parts definitely have been some of the hardest, I would say, for our family. But I think overall it's good.
I know the part about leaving the community. When we came here, I mean, I literally just went down the street. And all of a sudden, on Sundays, I was like, now I don't see anyone unless I like reach out to someone.
It's weird.
Make a plan.
Which just goes to show how cool and important church is, and to what you're saying too, of being involved in the community, that you have that regular check-ins and accountability and just community that you have, and that's where maybe right now there's a little bit of like a sense of loss there, where we go, okay, where do we slot in, where do we fit? And in some ways, it would have been even easier if we had just moved. You know, if that was where the Lord was calling us, just to be moving to somewhere else.
Yeah.
In that way, I'm thankful to still be in Grand Forks and so forth. But it does make that transition trickier, I think, for everybody to be like, well, Ben's still here. He's down the road, so we can access him for certain things or whatever. And then also for us to be like, we're, you still see everyone in a small town, but now it's just changed. So, yeah.
Pastor is a tricky thing too, where I think like you can never turn off the pastor switch kind of.
Yeah.
So you can't, on the one hand, I think you can't like fault people for like continuing to look for pastoral whatever. Yeah. But some things do have to end, obviously, like or transition to the other staff, or like very, especially, I don't know. I'm sure none of this is on your plate, but like administrative type things, or like ministry help, or like But in terms of being the guy that people look to for like advice or support or wisdom or encouragement, I mean, that's hard to ever. I don't know if you ever get away from, unless you're in a new community. Obviously.
Well, and I mean, that's another great question is, are you ever not a pastor once you are a pastor? Yeah. And we've talked about this before.
Well, our senior pastor, I think, is still people don't come to him and he's like, I'm not pastoring anymore.
Right.
He continues to do almost as much as he did before.
Like you're talking Henry. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have retired pastors, people could still even call them pastor, whatever. So, I mean, Peterson talks...
Because it's not a career, it's a calling.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Peterson talks a bit about that, the difference between job and vocation. And he uses the analogy of like a group of artists that he was had at his house, they're young adults, whatever, that he was witnessing to or whatever. But they all did jobs, whether they were a taxi driver or stocking a shelf or working at a coffee shop, but all of them said, no, well, I'm an artist. Yeah. That's who I am. That's what I do. Sure. And there's some similarities between that and even if I right now were working at a local grocery store or whatever else, I think still at my core, I'd be like, I'm a pastor. And Shayna talked about, like my wife talked about this even when we were finishing, was like, you will always be in ministry, whether you're a pastor or not, but that's just who you are. And I'm like, that's
like Paul couldn't have turned the switch on not being the Apostle Paul anymore, until death.
Yeah, for sure. So it's an interesting dynamic with the profession or the job or the vocation. Yeah.
How did you know it was time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, you can speak broadly about that, but I think for me specifically, I got to a point one day where I think I was at my desk, but I sat down at my desk and it just kind of came out verbally, where I said something like, I think I'm done. Like I think I'm done here. And I think we had gone through a tricky season, or there was some hard stuff or whatever, and I was feeling a little bit run down from that. But I wasn't like completely finished and upset or anything. I just remember sitting down and just being like, huh. And so then you kind of follow that up. And so for me, I do a lot of conversations with mentors or friends and just kind of talk it out. And then tons of prayer. So then that was following up from that. It was almost immediately one of my first times, because I would often spend time in the sanctuary at the church. All the lights are off. It's completely silent. And then just in prayer. And I, in one of those sessions after that, where I was praying, I just felt the Lord saying that I was also, it was time.
Oh, interesting.
And so then you have to follow it out too and go, okay, is this the Lord? Am I just not getting enough sleep or something? Or, check all those things. And as I was checking those things, it just seemed clear that my time was coming. I'm still wrestling this one out, but there was another level and I want to be careful with the language here, but there was a level at which I felt like I was losing my effectiveness. So I'm still trying to work that one out a bit, but I felt like maybe a better way to frame it was what the Lord had for me there was coming to just a close. You know, the work that he had set out, he had the finish line for, okay, you've done all that I had asked of you there. Now, again, is that true? I don't know. But I felt like there was a level at which that was the case too.
Yeah.
Now, could I have continued on into 2024 and been a pastor? I think so. But would it been best for me, and this was something else I was wrestling through, would it be best for me, but would it also be best for the congregation for me to get out of the way, in a sense, for the Lord to do the next thing for Gospel Chapel, which I believe he will in 2024 and beyond, and for me to just step aside. And so there's all those things kind of at play. If you speak broadly about when it's time to move on from a job, that's another whole conversation. But specifically for me, those are a few of those things. And then, of course, just conversations with my wife. The scariest conversation was when I had that inkling, and then to verbalize it to my wife or to someone like you or other close friends, because then it became more real, especially if people started to validate it, people that you trust. So then it's almost like, I don't even want to bring it up because I'm too scared, or I just think I want to put my head in the sand a little bit because I don't want to go. But I think that's one of the big lessons I learned was, I mean, the scriptures talk all about it, right? You can make all the plans you want. You don't know what the future holds. And in my mind, I was like, I'll be at Gospel Chapel for a very long time.
Yeah.
I knew for sure, nothing's for sure. I was confident in a minimum of 10 years at Gospel Chapel, but I was like, I'm sure it'll be more than that, And then it was 12 years. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. Is that helpful? Does that answer?
Yeah, for sure. I was just trying to look up that verse. I can't remember where it is. I thought it was in Acts, where Paul is like, I'm finished. I've kind of completed my work in this place.
Right.
And I think that's when he's like, I'm going to head to Spain.
Time to move on.
Yeah. And it's like, well, the work here isn't done.
Right.
But Paul clearly sees that his part in it is done.
Yeah.
Probably in the more evangelistic part, and someone else needs to carry on in the discipleship and stuff. But I don't think it's what I think Paul and others have felt like at times, from the Lord. Kind of my effectiveness here is complete, and someone else will carry this through.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And I again, this is more speculation. I think one of the fears I had, whether this was reality or not, was moving towards bitterness or burnout or whatever. It was I don't know that I was on that trajectory, but I was afraid that I might be. So it's another whole layer in the onion, maybe, but that was something I was wrestling through too, and talking to people about as well in some ways. But in all, there's lots of things we were working through in 2023. But even early-ish in 2023, all of a sudden I started to wonder. It was kind of around the spring. Almost a year ago in a couple months here, which is wild to think, where I was starting to go, oh man, is this the end? And when does that happen? And so here we are. Yeah.
It's funny how pastors end too. That this is the difference between calling it a career, but if you were leaving another job and you're like, I think it's time, you would give a 2 week, maybe a month notice and be gone. Yeah. It wouldn't be that big of a deal, even if you'd been there a long time.
Yeah.
But the church, it feels like this is a massive thing.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because it's
so personal,
a calling versus a career. Like you're really you're invested in this far more than the 8 hours of your workday, and like kind of every part of your being is invested in this thing in these people, and your life is connected to them. Like I think it's and you're shepherding them. You're accountable for the souls of these people. So even the transition, it's like you're not just gonna like be like, okay, sheep, I'm done.
Good luck out there.
Someone will be here soon to watch over the wolves. And like you care about them, so you're
for sure. And that's the hard part too, where you have to also release some of that, because for me, I can be like, okay, did I leave the congregation well to be cared for into the future? Well, a lot of that's not up to me anyway. So there's a level at which I just have to let that go. But at the same time being like, I've been caring for so many of these people for so long and walking with them that it's like, oh, I really want to set things up really well for everybody. But a lot of that is just like, well, you're just going to have to move out of the way.
And I think in Paul's kind of words in the book of Acts, like that setting up is not something that comes when you're ready to leave or after or whatever. Right. The setting up is everything setting them up for you to leave is everything you've been doing while you've been there.
Sure.
Like when Paul talks to the Ephesian elders, he's like, there's no blood on my hands.
Yeah.
Which made me think like, okay, there could be blood on your hands then for you to argue that there isn't. So how can there be blood on a pastor's hands? Like this is when he's leaving. He's saying farewell, and he tells them like, just so you know, I'm innocent of anyone's blood or whatever. And then he says, I'm innocent of their blood because you know that while I was with you, I never shrank from preaching basically the full counsel of God's will. So him preparing them for him to leave and him going innocent of anyone's blood was that while he was there, he gave them everything. Like he preached the full breadth of God's word. He didn't like in the shepherds in Ezekiel 34 that get condemned or, accused of being bad shepherds is because they, these catastrophes were coming and those shepherds didn't warn Israel of what was coming. They just told them happy things and good things and whatever. So then they were accountable for the destruction of these people because they didn't warn them. I think that's similar again to Paul. It's like he gave all the warnings. He gave all the word. Like he preached everything. So I think that's one aspect that you can leave and kind of leave it in God's hands. Yeah. Because that while you were there, you did everything you could do, were supposed to do. Yeah. You didn't hold anything back.
Yep. Yeah. Great point.
It's a neat passage. I think that's like Acts 15.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have to check that
Paul's
one again.
Paul's farewell.
Yeah.
Being like, he says like, I'm not going to see you face to face again. Like it's his full goodbye.
Yeah. See you later.
As a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah.
There should probably be a book, maybe it is written on that, about like how to leave ministries. Because that's probably a good picture.
Yeah, there is a few leaving out there. But there's actually even transitional coaches.
Okay. But I mean, someone should write on that passage.
Oh, yeah.
A template for leaving. But anyways, did you have thoughts as you were going through it on how you can end well? How pastors end well? You ended well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so the obvious one is, especially if you're feeling run down a bit or if you're holding on to anything, you have to let that go and not take this as your final chance to really be like, well, now I'm going to tell you what I really think of you, and you, sure. Whether that's on a individual or smaller level or, I mean, that's the obvious one.
Sure.
But I think there's part of it where practically you're just trying to leave in terms of the work you've done. You try to tie up loose ends. You try to make sure that it's clear what you've been working on or where you're at with that kind of stuff. I think there's also just really cool ways that you can still, you have this final opportunity, if we're talking about a pastor specifically, to be a pastor for them kind of one last time. So for me, it was important for me to, I think it was in the last couple of months even, I just wrote like a farewell and a thank you card for most of the congregation. And just, especially a lot of people who've impacted me, but just give them that final like goodbye, but also just thank you for what you've done for me as well. And just try to have that finality for both of us. And then of course, for me, there was the opportunity that Pastor Doug and I, scheduled in advance was my last Sunday was my last sermon as well. So you can hopefully leave well in that sense too. And just kind of preach that final sermon. But yeah, leaving well, it's so important for starting the next thing. So if I left poorly, how would that reflect on my next employer and them going, well, we've heard that, you did this, and this, and now you're going to work for us. So what is that going to mean when you're done here with us? And are you going to cut us loose at a bad time? Or again, when it's time, but there's also great conversations you can have with the elders and other staff members on that exit. And I think I did that well in terms of just trying to lay that out and go, okay, what do you even need from me before I'm gone? And sometimes people don't know, but at least there's some of that kind of stuff too. But
it's funny how much your ending kind of defines the whole time you were there.
Oh yeah.
Like if you don't end well, sometimes or to some degree, everything that led up to the end is kind of lost.
It could be tainted for sure. I mean, that's the big question with, especially when it comes to ministry leaders who were caught in some kind of scandal. Then it's like, wait, he preached on these things, but he didn't live it out. Or, I mean, those are the obvious examples. But yeah, certainly if you didn't have any of that, but then at the end you're kind of like, well, forget all you guys. I'm out of here, and I'm going on to bigger and better things. And I'm, it's just like, that last 12 years is definitely now
it changes how people look back on it. It doesn't mean you didn't have real experiences or real conversations, whatever, but in terms of people reflecting back now, maybe valuing or appreciating certain things or remembering things. As soon as the ending's bad, then now when people look back through this lens where everything's kind of a wash.
For sure.
Now it's like, I don't want to remember any of that now, or I don't need to go back and re-listen to that or read that or like.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Was he actually genuine when he gave me this advice? Was he, living out what he actually talked about? Yeah. I had that thought too. And
like the legacy, I guess. That's the looking back. The legacy is ruined.
For sure. And
based on how you end.
The crazy thing, especially not just pastors, but probably most jobs, but certainly in ministry, is for the rest of your life, there's still this opportunity that you can really do something that will still taint, even though I'm not at Gospel Chapel anymore. Years down the road, something happens, whatever, people be like, oh, well, now I'm less whatever. It was less impactful what he or she did. But
it's no small thing that Paul can say, like, I finished the race, I fought the good fight. And
how can we do that?
Everything.
Oh yeah. So how can you do that in a lifetime? But how can you also do it in micro or like in seasons and chapters of your life to say, okay, in this portion, I feel good about the work that I did, the work that the Lord did through me, and I can put a stamp on this and move on to the next thing. I mean, and the added layer for us too was thinking through my next role is also donor support. And I want to make sure that I have a good relationship with these people who potentially could be helping me out in many ways through prayer and finances. I mean, that's a shallow reason to do that. But there's also, even more importantly, like a potential that we want to re-engage with that community. So if you end poorly, in whatever way, and then all of a sudden you show up. It's like, oh, great, you're here now. So anyway, I think what we're getting at though is we end well because it's what the Lord has called us to do.
Yeah.
And if
they're supposed to be good enders.
Yeah,
I guess, huh?
For sure. I mean, you can look at lots of different stories where people's maybe beginning didn't start so well, especially before they knew the Lord or the way that they lived their lives. But
nobody looks back on a beginning to define a ministry. Right?
Not usually.
I mean, if the beginning, unless nothing changed.
Yeah.
But like if the ministry got good, nobody's thinking about your beginning.
Yep.
But your ending.
The ending is so crucial, so important for life and for
even coming into this world. It's like, doesn't really matter how messy it is when you come in, but it matters how you go out, kind of like what kind of person you are, what you're.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe maybe there's more, not unlike a baby and a adult and whatever. There's like more grace given to beginnings, and there's a certain expectation upon your ending.
For sure.
Like if by this point.
Oh yeah. When I started at 23 years old, I mean, the church maybe knew kind of what they're getting into, but I mean, I felt like I got tons of grace my whole time there.
Sure.
Lots of grace and leverage. No, it's not the right word.
Leverage is a good word though.
But just the amount of flexibility, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But certainly, I think they would have grown tired if it's like Ben's sermons are not improving at all from in the right ways improving, but just growth. We should be seeing growth. So
any last and parting words? Any big things to promote?
Oh, promote. In which way?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what they say.
They do on some of these
when they with the celebrity types.
Sure.
But you might have a project that you're wanting to.
Really excited for, I guess, since we're talking all about all these things, really excited for the future of Gospel Chapel and praying for it all the time. And so that's we're excited to see what the Lord has there. We're also just, I think, I'll say this. We were talking about this briefly before. When I was a pastor, there definitely wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think about Gospel Chapel and the congregation and all sorts of other things that were whatever we were going through at the time. And lots of moments through the day where you're praying or you're thinking about those things all the time. And now I'm moving into something different, and that's been an interesting transition. But I will say, and I think it's appropriate and okay to say that, like, I'm just really excited for 2024 and what that holds for me, for my family. I'm really trying to work through, not necessarily who am I, but what are my gifts or skills that the Lord wants me to use now. And that's been an interesting. When you're a pastor, it's just kind of laid out for you, and you do those things. But now it's like, okay, how do I best serve the kingdom with what I have, or what am I most skilled at, and just kind of working through some of that. But parting words, I think we're just really excited for this new opportunity we have, working for youth worker community, working for the coalition, the nonprofits. Working with youth pastors again is really fun, and just walking alongside them, and then just seeing where all this will go. It's really exciting, and it's fun, and it's just cool working with a new team. So the only thing I guess I would promote is, if you're youth workers, if you're involved in youth ministry at all, camp ministry, and in Canada, then we got a lot of really cool, exciting things with conferences.
You could be their academic coordinator.
Yep, I can be the academic coordinator if you're interested in getting more schooling, getting a BA or an MA. Our program is fantastic, and it's really fun, and we'd love to connect with you.
2024 has been pretty good to you. I think 2025 is going to be good.
Oh, in another year from now. Yeah, we'll focus on 2024 for now, but so far so good.
Next time maybe we chat about youth ministry.
Yes, we should do that.
What that looks like, and
that'd be great.
How you define its success, etc.
Yeah, love it. Stay tuned.
You can keep the keep the Fiji water.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah. Only the best. Here.